Forget the romanticized notions of elegant courtesans lounging on silk cushions, being pampered in marble palaces. We're diving into the gritty, uncomfortable truth of what it actually meant to be a hetera, a palak, or any other type of kept woman in a civilization that valued women somewhere between livestock and property, and sometimes ranked them lower than both. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So you've managed to wake up in ancient Greece as someone's concubine. Congratulations, the sun hasn't even fully risen, and you're already calculating how to navigate another day without being sold, abandoned, or beaten. Your eyes open not to an alarm clock, but to the sound of your owner, because that's what he is, make no mistake. Clearing his throat in that particular way that means he wants something from you. There's no coffee waiting for you. There's no shower with hot water and fluffy towels. There's no smartphone to check, no weather app to see if you'll need a jacket. Instead, you wake up on whatever sleeping arrangement you've been allocated. If you're lucky, it's a straw mattress that only smells mildly of the previous occupant's bodily fluids. If you're not lucky, it's the floor with a thin blanket that offers about as much comfort and warmth as a wet napkin. Your sleeping space isn't private. Privacy is a concept that exists for free citizens, particularly male ones. You might share a room with other household slaves, or you might sleep in an alcove off the main room, separated by nothing more than a curtain that provides the illusion of privacy, while ensuring everyone can hear exactly what happens when your owner decides he wants company in the middle of the night. The first sensation of your day isn't the gentle warmth of sunlight streaming through windows, it's the immediate assessment of your own body for new aches, pains, or marks that weren't there yesterday. Your back aches because your sleeping surface would make a medieval torture device seem luxurious. Your neck has a crick from the non-existent pillow support, and depending on how your owner treated you the night before, you might be inventorying bruises, soreness, or other physical reminders of your complete lack of bodily autonomy. There's no bathroom to retreat to for a private moment of preparation. Instead, you use a chamber pot that may or may not have been emptied recently, and the contents of which will later be thrown directly into the street because ancient Athens had the sewage system of a failed camping trip. The smell is immediate and persistent, a delightful mixture of human waste, stale wine, olive oil that's gone rancid, and whatever the household's goats have been doing in the courtyard. Your morning hygiene routine consists of whatever water is available, which is probably yesterday's water that's been sitting in a clay vessel, possibly sharing space with a few dead insects. There's no soap as we know it. You might have access to some olive oil and ash mixture that removes dirt about as effectively as rubbing yourself with muddy leaves. Your teeth get cleaned with a twig, if you're lucky. Most mornings you just accept that your mouth tastes like you've been chewing on old leather and move on with your day. Getting dressed is an exercise in managing someone else's property, namely, you. Your clothing isn't yours, it belongs to your owner, and it's been selected based on how it makes you look to other men, not on comfort or personal preference. The fabric might be silk if your owner is wealthy and wants to show off his expensive possessions, or it might be rough wool that chafes against your skin like friendly sandpaper. Either way, you wear what you're given and express gratitude for it. Because the alternative is wearing nothing at all, and ancient Greek winters are not kind to naked people. Your morning begins not with planning your own day, but with reading the mood of your owner. Is he happy? Angry? Drunk from last night? Planning to entertain guests? Each possibility requires a different strategy for survival. A happy owner might ignore you entirely, which is often the best possible outcome. An angry owner might decide you're responsible for whatever is bothering him, whether it's bad weather, political problems, or the fact that his favourite horse is limping. A drunk owner is unpredictable and potentially dangerous, and an owner expecting guests means you'll be on display, performing your role as living evidence of his wealth and status. The concept of starting your day with personal goals, hobbies, or individual interests is as foreign as the concept of human rights. Your morning routine revolves entirely around anticipating what someone else wants from you and preparing to deliver it with a smile, whether that's sexual services, domestic labour, entertainment, or simply being decorative furniture that occasionally speaks. You have no schedule of your own, No meetings to attend, no projects to work on. Your time belongs to someone else completely, and your morning preparation consists of making yourself ready to be used however he sees fit. It's like being a multi-purpose tool in someone else's workshop. Sometimes you're a hammer, sometimes you're a screwdriver, and sometimes you're just something to look at while the owner decides what he actually needs. As you prepare for the day, you're also calculating resources. How much food might be available? Will there be enough water for both drinking and washing? Are any of the other household members sick with something contagious? Is your owner in financial trouble that might result in selling you to someone worse? These aren't casual thoughts, they're survival assessments that determine how you'll navigate the next 16 hours. The morning light filtering through the small windows reminds you that time moves forward relentlessly, but your life remains static. You don't age into freedom, you don't earn your way to independence, and you don't retire to a comfortable old age. You age into decreased value, which means decreased food, decreased shelter, and increased vulnerability. Every morning is potentially one day closer to being discarded when you're no longer young or attractive enough to serve your primary function. Now that you're awake and theoretically ready to face the day, let's talk about food, or rather, the ongoing negotiation between you and starvation that defines every single meal. In ancient Greece, your relationship with food isn't about preferences, dietary restrictions, or whether you're in the mood for something particular. It's about getting enough calories to remain alive and attractive, because the moment you become too thin or too weak to perform your duties, you become disposable. Your breakfast, if you get one, consists of whatever the household can spare after the free members have eaten their fill. This might be some bread that's hard enough to use as a building material, olives that have seen better decades, and possibly some watered-down wine that serves as both beverage and liquid courage for the day ahead. The bread isn't the soft, fluffy kind you're imagining. It's dense, gritty, and contains enough random debris that eating it is an exercise in optimism. Every bite is a gamble. Will this be grain, or will this be the small rock that destroys one of your remaining teeth? The kitchen, if you can call it that, operates on the principle that food safety is optional and flavor is accidental. There's no refrigeration, so everything exists in various stages of decay. The olive oil that's been sitting in clay pots for months has developed a personality of its own, rancid, bitter, and somehow both oily and gritty at the same time. The wine has been watered down so much that it's basically purple water with delusions of grandeur, but it's safer to drink than the actual water, which comes from sources that also serve as community bathrooms and garbage dumps. Meat is a luxury that appears on your plate about as often as honest politicians appear in Athens, which is to say, rarely and usually under suspicious circumstances. When meat does appear, it's often the parts that the free citizens didn't want. Gristle, organs, and cuts that require more chewing than a piece of leather armor. You learn to be grateful for these scraps because the alternative is discovering what prolonged protein deficiency does to the human body. And spoiler alert, it's not pleasant. Fish, living in a coastal civilization, should be plentiful. Right? Wrong. Fresh fish goes to free citizens who can afford it. You get the fish that's been sitting in the sun just long enough to develop that special aroma that hovers between questionable and definitely going to cause problems later. The salt-preserved fish is better, but it's so salty that eating it makes you thirsty enough to drink from puddles, which brings us back to the water quality issue. Vegetables exist, but they exist in a state that suggests they've given up on life before you even encounter them. Wilted greens, roots that are more dirt than food, and legumes that have been stored so long they've achieved the texture of small pebbles. Cooking doesn't improve them much, since cooking methods are limited to boiling until surrender or roasting until defeated. Seasoning consists of salt, if it's available, and whatever herbs haven't died from neglect. The timing of meals depends entirely on your owner's schedule and mood. Sometimes you eat twice a day, sometimes once, and sometimes you discover that fasting wasn't a spiritual choice, but an economic necessity. Your stomach learns to accept uncertainty as a normal state of being. The gnawing sensation of hunger becomes background noise, like the sound of neighbors arguing or dogs barking in the distance. Eating is often a communal experience, but not in the warm family gathering way you might imagine. It's communal in the way that feeding time at a zoo is communal. Everyone gets their allocation. There's an established hierarchy about who eats what and when, and there's always the underlying tension that there might not be enough to go around. You eat quickly, not because you're in a hurry, but because eating slowly means someone else might decide you've had enough and take the rest of your food. The concept of having favorite foods or dietary preferences is as relevant as having preferences about which diseases you'd like to catch. You eat what's available, when it's available, and you express gratitude regardless of how it tastes or what it might be doing to your digestive system. Complaining about food is a luxury reserved for people who have alternatives, and you definitively do not have alternatives. Your body adapts to this nutritional uncertainty in ways that would fascinate modern doctors and horrify modern nutritionists. You become an expert at extracting maximum value from minimal resources, at making a small amount of food last longer than physics suggests possible, and at suppressing the physical discomfort of chronic low-level hunger. Your stomach shrinks, your metabolism slows, and your body enters a permanent state of conservation mode. The social aspects of eating are equally complex. Meals aren't social gatherings where you participate in conversation. You're the entertainment, not a participant. You might serve food to others while not eating yourself. You might eat separately from the free members of the household. Or you might eat at the same time but with the understanding that speaking without permission could result in losing your food privileges entirely. Your relationship with food becomes one of the primary ways you measure the quality of your life. A day with adequate food is a good day. A day with fresh food is practically a holiday. A day with enough food to feel actually full is so rare that you remember it for months afterward. And a day without food reminds you exactly how precarious your situation really is. Food also becomes a tool of control. Owners who want to reward you might provide better meals, additional portions, or access to foods that are normally off limits. Owners who want to punish you, restrict your food, reduce your portions, or give you food that's spoiled just enough to make eating it unpleasant, but not quite dangerous enough to kill you outright. Your access to nutrition becomes another way your complete dependence is reinforced. So you've managed to consume enough questionable nutrition to maintain basic life functions. Congratulations. Now it's time for the daily transformation from person who just woke up to decorative object that pleases men. Your beauty routine in ancient Greece isn't about self-expression or feeling confident. It's about maintaining your economic value as a commodity. And just like maintaining any valuable object, it's time-consuming, uncomfortable, and potentially dangerous. Let's start with your skincare routine, which consists of materials that would make modern dermatologists weep. You begin by applying a mixture of white lead and chalk to achieve that fashionably pale complexion that signals you don't have to work outdoors like a common labourer. The white lead is toxic, not might cause mild irritation toxic, but will slowly poison you and eventually cause organ failure toxic. But hey, at least you'll have beautifully pale skin while your nervous system deteriorates. The application process involves using your fingers or crude tools to spread this toxic paste across your face, neck, and any other visible skin. There's no mirror in the modern sense. You're using polished bronze or copper that provides about as much clarity as looking at your reflection in a muddy puddle. You're essentially painting your face blind, relying on experience and the feedback of others to determine whether you've achieved attractively pale or corpse-like. For your cheeks and lips, you apply rouge made from ochre, red clay, or if you're particularly unfortunate, cinnabar, which is mercury-based and even more toxic than the white lead foundation. The goal is to look healthy and vibrant, which is ironic since the cosmetics you're using are systematically destroying your health. It's like trying to appear lively while slowly dying, which, now that I think about it, is a pretty accurate metaphor for your entire existence. Your eyes require kohl made from antimony, lead or soot, mixed with various oils and fats. You apply this with a thin stick or your finger, trying to create dramatic lines that make your eyes appear larger and more appealing. The antimony-based kohl will give you eye infections. The lead-based version will contribute to your overall lead poisoning, and the soot version will just make you look like you've been crying, which might actually be accurate depending on how your morning has gone. Hair care in ancient Greece involves a level of complexity that would challenge modern beauty influencers. First, you need to wash your hair with a mixture of clay, ash, and whatever oils are available. This process removes dirt, but also strips away all natural oils, leaving your hair with the texture of sun-dried weeds. Then you apply various oils and perfumes to restore some semblance of moisture and scent, creating a greasy, heavily fragranced result that attracts flies and makes sleeping on cloth impossible without leaving permanent stains. The styling process involves heated metal implements that have been warmed over an open fire, no temperature control, no safety features, just red-hot metal that you hope won't burn your scalp too badly. Curling your hair means wrapping sections around metal rods, heated to temperatures that could brand cattle, holding them long enough to create curls while trying not to singe your eyebrows or set your hair on fire. The smell of burning hair becomes a regular part of your beauty routine, along with small burns on your scalp, neck, and fingers. Hair color is achieved through various plant-based dyes and metallic compounds that have all the predictability of ancient Greek weather. Attempting to achieve blonde hair might involve applications of saffron, turmeric, or sulfur compounds that could turn your hair anything from golden to green to the color of spoiled cheese. Brunette shades are achieved with walnut hulls, iron filings, or other substances that leave your hair brittle and prone to breaking off in chunks. The elaborate hairstyles fashionable among upper-class women require hours of work and the assistance of other people, since achieving complex braids, curls, and arrangements while looking in a bronze mirror is like trying to perform surgery while wearing oven mitts. Your hair becomes a collaborative art project involving multiple people, heated tools, toxic dyes, and enough oil to lubricate a chariot axle. Perfume isn't a subtle accent. It's a necessity to mask the various odors that accumulate when regular bathing isn't possible and effective deodorants don't exist. You apply oils scented with flowers, herbs, spices, or whatever aromatic substances are available, creating a fragrance cloud that serves as both attraction and defense mechanism. The goal is to smell better than everyone else around you, which isn't particularly challenging given the general aromatic landscape of ancient Athens. Nail care involves filing with rough stones or metal implements, creating smooth edges that won't catch on fabric or scratch your owner's skin during intimate moments. You might tint your nails with henna or other plant-based dyes, assuming you can access these materials and have time for the application process. Body hair removal is accomplished through methods that make modern waxing seem like a gentle massage. Tweezers made from metal or bone remove individual hairs with the efficiency of torture and the comfort level of voluntary surgery. For larger areas, you might use a primitive razor that's essentially a sharp piece of metal, or various depilatory pastes made from caustic substances that dissolve hair and occasionally skin. The final touches involve jewelry, if it's available, and clothing arrangements that maximize your physical appeal while remaining practical for the day's activities. Jewelry isn't yours, it belongs to your owner and represents his wealth rather than your personal taste. You wear what enhances his status, whether it's comfortable, attractive to you, or compatible with your skin tone. Throughout this entire process, you're not preparing for your own day, you're preparing to be looked at, evaluated, and potentially selected for various purposes by men who will judge your appearance against their expectations and preferences. Your beauty routine isn't self-care, it's product maintenance. You're preparing the merchandise for display, and the merchandise happens to be you. The irony is palpable. You spend hours each day applying toxic substances to make yourself more attractive, while those same substances slowly damage your health and reduce your lifespan. You're literally killing yourself to be beautiful, and in a society where your value depends entirely on your appearance, refusing to participate isn't really an option. Now that you're properly painted and styled for maximum aesthetic appeal, let's discuss the harsh mathematics of your existence. Being a concubine in ancient Greece operates on economic principles that make modern capitalism look generous and humane. You are simultaneously a luxury good, a service provider, a status symbol, and a depreciating asset, all rolled into one person who still needs to eat, sleep, and somehow maintain sanity while being treated like a particularly expensive piece of furniture. Your value fluctuates based on market conditions you can't control and factors you can't change. Age decreases your worth automatically and irreversibly. Illness, even temporary illness, reduces your value. Pregnancy might increase your value if your owner wants children, or destroy it completely if children aren't part of his plans. Beauty standards change based on fashion, regional preferences, and the personal tastes of whoever might be evaluating you. You're constantly being appraised by people who see you as an investment rather than a human being. The financial arrangements surrounding your existence vary, depending on your specific situation, but none of them involve you having any control over money, property, or economic decisions. If you're a hetaira, technically a higher class prostitute with some social standing, you might have access to luxury goods and better living conditions, but you still don't own anything. Your jewelry, clothing, furniture, and even the space you occupy belong to someone else. You're like an expensive pet that happens to be capable of conversation and sexual services. If you're a palik, essentially alive in concubine, your situation is more like being a specialized household appliance. You provide specific services in exchange for room, board, and protection, but you have no legal rights, no job security, and no retirement plan. Your owner can sell you, trade you, or simply abandon you whenever it's economically convenient or personally appealing. You might live in comfortable circumstances for years, only to be discarded the moment your owner's financial situation changes or he decides he wants someone younger. The household economics that determine your daily life operate on principles that would make modern labour laws spontaneously combust. You work whenever your owner wants you to work, for as long as he wants you to work, doing whatever he wants you to do. There are no weekends, no vacation days, no sick leave, and definitely no workers' compensation if you're injured while performing your duties. Your schedule is determined entirely by someone else's needs, desires, and whims. Your living expenses are calculated by your owner based on what he considers necessary to maintain your value, not what you need to be comfortable or healthy. Food, clothing, shelter, and medical care are provided at levels designed to keep you functional rather than happy. It's like maintaining a horse. You get enough to stay alive and capable of performing, but comfort is a luxury that depends entirely on your owner's generosity and financial situation. The concept of saving money or building wealth is completely irrelevant to your situation. Any gifts, payments, or valuable items you receive belong to your owner by default. You can't make investments, buy property, or plan for your financial future because you don't have a financial future in any meaningful sense. Your entire economic existence is tied to your ability to please someone who could decide tomorrow that he's bored with you. Your earning potential decreases automatically with age, but unlike modern careers where experience and skill development can compensate for aging, your primary value proposition is tied directly to physical attributes that deteriorate over time. You're in a profession where becoming better at your job doesn't necessarily make you more valuable, and where experience can actually work against you if it comes with visible aging. The business model of concubinage operates on the assumption that women are interchangeable commodities with different features and price points. You compete not just with other concubines, but with wives, slaves, prostitutes, and the possibility that your owner might decide to live without any female companionship at all. Market saturation is a constant threat, and your job security depends on maintaining competitive advantages in a field where the primary qualifications are being young, attractive, and sexually available. Contract negotiations involve zero input from you. The terms of your service, living conditions, expectations, and potential termination procedures are decided by other people. You might not even know the specific arrangements that govern your situation. You simply exist within whatever framework has been established and hope that it continues to include basic necessities like food and shelter. Your economic relationship with your owner resembles a combination of employment, slavery, and ownership that defies modern categories. You're not exactly an employee because you have no rights, no wages, and no ability to quit. You're not exactly a slave because your situation might involve some privileges and better treatment. You're not exactly property because you can think, speak, and theoretically influence your circumstances through behavior and performance. The taxation and legal implications of your existence are handled entirely by your owner. You don't pay taxes because you don't own anything to be taxed. You don't have legal standing because you're not considered a full citizen. Any crimes committed against you are treated as crimes against your owner's property, and any crimes you commit reflect on your owner's responsibility and reputation. Healthcare expenses are calculated based on maintaining your value rather than your well-being. If you're sick with something that doesn't affect your appearance or performance, medical care might be considered an unnecessary expense. If you're injured in a way that reduces your attractiveness, your owner might decide that veterinary care isn't worth the investment. You receive medical attention when it makes economic sense, not when you need it. The long-term financial planning for your situation is entirely in someone else's hands. Your owner might be preparing to sell you, trade you, or keep you until you're too old to be useful. He might be planning to free you when he dies, or he might be planning to include you in his estate as property to be inherited by his heirs. Your future is determined by economic calculations that treat your remaining years as a depreciating asset with declining returns on investment. So you've navigated the morning routine, managed to consume some marginally edible substances, transformed yourself into an aesthetically pleasing object, and now it's time to understand exactly where you fit in the complex social machinery of ancient Greek society. Spoiler alert, you don't fit anywhere good. You exist in a social limbo that's below respectable women, but above actual slaves, which means you get to experience discrimination from above and resentment from below. It's like being the middle child in a family where everyone hates each other and the parents occasionally sell the children to pay debts. The social hierarchy of ancient Greece operates like a pyramid, but instead of being built with stone blocks, it's constructed from different levels of human misery. At the top are free male citizens who own property and participate in democracy. They're the only people who actually matter in legal, political, and social terms. Below them are free women who are citizens by birth, but have roughly the same political rights as decorative pottery. Then come foreign residents who have some rights but can't vote or own land. Then various categories of slaves. And then, in a special category of social awkwardness, there's you. You're not a wife, which means you have none of the protections, limited though they are, that come with legal marriage. Wives, despite being treated like property themselves, at least have the security of marriage contracts, family connections, and social expectations that provide some stability. You don't have any of that. You're also not a typical household slave, which means you don't have the clear social position and defined role that slaves occupy. You exist in a grey area where your status depends entirely on your relationship with your owner, and can change instantly based on his mood, financial situation, or personal preferences. Your interactions with free women range from awkward to hostile. Wives often see you as a threat to their own security, which is accurate since their husbands might prefer spending time with you rather than fulfilling their marital obligations. Free women who aren't married might view you with a mixture of contempt and fear. Contempt because your sexual availability challenges their own value in the marriage market, and fear because your existence reminds them how easily women can fall into vulnerable situations. The wives of wealthy men exist in a parallel universe where they're protected by law, family connections, and social conventions, but they're also restricted by those same forces. They can't move freely through the city, can't participate in public life, and spend most of their time in women's quarters, managing households and raising children. They look at you and see either a cautionary tale of what happens to women without family protection, or a threat to their own carefully maintained domestic security. Free women who work, and there are some, despite what Hollywood suggests, occupy trades like weaving, pottery, food preparation, or religious services. They have economic independence, legal protection, and social standing that you completely lack. Your relationship with them is complicated because you're living a life that's simultaneously more luxurious and more precarious than theirs. You might have access to better clothing, food, and shelter, but you have zero security and no control over your circumstances. Male slaves in the household occupy a social position that's both better and worse than yours. They're clearly defined as property, which means their roles and expectations are established by law and custom. They can't be discarded as easily as you can, because they represent significant investments in labour capacity. Male slaves might eventually earn or purchase their freedom, marry, and establish families. They have a path to social mobility that's completely unavailable to you. Female household slaves share some of your vulnerabilities, but have different social positions. They're not expected to be sexually attractive or available, which protects them from some forms of exploitation while exposing them to others. They perform domestic labour, childcare, and craft work that has clear economic value. Their work is essential to household functioning, while your role is essentially decorative and recreational. Your relationship with other concubines is shaped by competition and scarcity. You're competing for resources, attention, and survival in a situation where there's rarely enough security to go around. Friendships are possible, but complicated by the fact that your interests often conflict directly. If your owner prefers another concubine, your own situation becomes more precarious. If you become his favourite, Other concubines might resent you for taking resources that could have been shared. The social expectations placed on you are contradictory and impossible to satisfy completely. You're expected to be sexually appealing, but not promiscuous, educated and entertaining but not threatening, loyal and devoted, but not possessive, grateful for your situation, but not complacent about maintaining your value. You're supposed to enhance your owner's social status while remaining invisible when your presence might be inconvenient. Public spaces present their own social navigation challenges. You can't move through Athens the way free citizens do. Your presence in certain areas might be restricted or completely forbidden. When you do appear in public, your clothing, jewelry, and behavior all signal your social status to everyone you encounter. You're marked as someone's property, and other people adjust their behavior toward you accordingly. Religious and cultural events create additional social complications. You might be included in household religious observances, but excluded from public religious festivals. You might be expected to participate in cultural celebrations in ways that emphasize your role as entertainment rather than as a community member. Your religious and cultural life exists at the discretion of your owner and is shaped by his social obligations rather than your own spiritual needs. The legal system treats you as a complicated footnote rather than a person with rights. You can't own property, enter contracts, represent yourself in legal proceedings, or make decisions about your own life. If you're involved in legal disputes, it's because something has happened to your owner's property, namely, you, not because you have any standing as an individual. You're like a valuable vase that can talk. If someone breaks you, the crime is against your owner, not against you. Your social education consists of learning to read these hierarchies accurately and navigate them without stepping on anyone's status or threatening anyone's position. You learn who can be spoken to and who must be deferred to, who can be trusted with small confidences and who will use any information against you, who has the power to improve your situation and who can destroy it entirely. The psychological impact of occupying this social position is profound and lasting. You internalize the constant message that your value as a person depends entirely on your usefulness to others, particularly men. You learn to suppress your own preferences, opinions, and desires in favor of whatever will maintain your precarious position. You develop survival skills that prioritize pleasing others over protecting yourself, because self-protection often conflicts with the expectations others have for your behavior. Now that you understand your position in the social hierarchy, somewhere between livestock and furniture, let's discuss the core job requirements that determine whether you eat today or spend the evening being advertised for sale in the agora. Your primary professional skill isn't reading, writing, mathematics, or any craft that might provide long-term security. It's sexual performance, and the performance standards are determined entirely by your owner's preferences, which may change without notice and definitely without your input. Your education in sexual techniques begins early and is comprehensive in ways that would make modern sex education curricula seem quaint. You learn not just the physical mechanics, but the psychological manipulation, emotional performance, and social dynamics that make the difference between being valued and being discarded. This isn't about personal pleasure or mutual satisfaction. It's about maintaining your market value through skilled labor that happens to involve your body. The performance requirements extend far beyond simple sexual availability. You're expected to demonstrate enthusiasm for activities you might find unpleasant, painful, or degrading. Authentic enthusiasm is preferred, but convincing fake enthusiasm is acceptable as long as the illusion is maintained completely. Your owner is paying for the fantasy that you genuinely desire him, find him irresistibly attractive, and consider servicing his needs to be the highlight of your existence. Timing is crucial and completely outside your control. You might be required to be instantly available whenever your owner decides he wants sexual services, regardless of your own physical condition, emotional state, or previous activities. There's no "not tonight, I have a headache" option, when your headache could result in being sold to someone who specializes in training women to be more compliant through methods that make headaches seem trivial. The variety of services expected depends on your owner's creativity, education, and personal interests. Some men prefer simple, straightforward encounters that are over quickly and require minimal emotional investment from either party. Others have elaborate fantasies that require you to role-play scenarios, adopt different personalities, or participate in activities that would challenge professional actors. You might spend an evening pretending to be a captured enemy soldier, a goddess, a naive young girl, or any other character that appeals to his imagination. Physical preparation for these encounters involves maintaining your body in ways that prioritize his preferences over your comfort or health. This might mean removing body hair from areas that aren't naturally hairless, maintaining extremely specific grooming standards, or using various oils, perfumes, and cosmetics that enhance your appeal while potentially causing skin irritation, allergic reactions, or long-term health problems. The locations where these services are performed vary depending on your owner's living situation and social circumstances. You might have a private space designated for these activities, or you might be expected to perform in his bedroom, a guest room when he's entertaining visitors, or even outdoor spaces if privacy isn't a priority. The setting affects the performance requirements. Some locations call for discretion and quiet efficiency, while others might require more theatrical displays. Birth control is your responsibility, but the available methods range from ineffective to dangerous. You might use various herbs, douches, or physical barriers that provide the illusion of pregnancy prevention while offering roughly the same reliability as hoping really hard. Pregnancy can either increase your value if your owner wants children, or destroy your career entirely if children aren't part of his plans. The uncertainty adds another layer of anxiety to every sexual encounter. Disease prevention involves strategies that would make modern public health officials weep into their medical textbooks. You're potentially exposed to sexually transmitted infections from your owner, and any partners he might bring to share your services. But the available treatments consist mainly of hoping that prayer and various herbal concoctions will cure whatever you might contract. Some diseases are merely unpleasant and embarrassing, while others can cause infertility, permanent disability, or death. The risk assessment is entirely yours to make, but refusing sexual services because of health concerns isn't really an option. The emotional labor required for sexual performance is often more exhausting than the physical aspects. You're expected to make your owner feel desired, powerful, and sexually competent, regardless of his actual abilities or personal hygiene standards. This might involve convincing a man who smells like he's been marinating in his own sweat for weeks that he's irresistibly attractive, or making someone who has the sexual technique of a particularly clumsy goat believe he's a master lover. Your performance reviews happen in real time and can result in immediate consequences. If your owner is dissatisfied with your services, he might reduce your food, clothing, or shelter allocations. He might decide to share you with friends or guests as a form of entertainment or business hospitality. He might sell you to someone with a reputation for being harder to please or more physically demanding. Or he might simply abandon you to find your own way in a society that offers few options for women without male protection. The psychological impact of performing sexual enthusiasm for people you don't find attractive, don't like personally, or actively fear creates a complex relationship with your own sexuality. You learn to separate your physical responses from your emotional experiences, to protect your authentic feelings by compartmentalizing them away from your professional activities. This survival mechanism helps you endure the work but can make it difficult to experience genuine intimacy, even when the opportunity arises. Competition with other sexual partners is constant and multifaceted. Your owner might have a wife whose sexual services are expected as part of marriage, but who might not be required to perform with the same enthusiasm or variety that you provide. He might have access to prostitutes who offer different services or experiences. He might be considering acquiring additional concubines who could replace you entirely. Your job security depends on maintaining competitive advantages in a field where the metrics for success are subjective and can change without warning. The aging process presents particular challenges for sexual performance work. Your value decreases with every year, every small change in your physical appearance, and every sign that you're becoming less fertile or sexually appealing. You're competing against younger women who have more energy, fewer physical ailments, and less emotional baggage from years of sexual service work. The career trajectory is entirely downward, with no possibility of promotion, skill development, or lateral movement to less physically demanding roles. Training for sexual performance might involve instruction from other women, observation of professional prostitutes, or simply learning through trial and error with feedback that ranges from gentle correction to physical punishment. The educational process is designed to maximize your value rather than your personal satisfaction or emotional well-being. You learn techniques that please men rather than techniques that might be mutually enjoyable or personally fulfilling. The business aspects of sexual performance create additional pressures. Your owner might use your services as part of business negotiations, political alliances, or social networking. You might be expected to gather information from visitors, influence their opinions, or simply provide entertainment that enhances your owner's reputation as a generous host. These expectations transform sexual encounters into complex social and economic transactions where your performance affects more than just personal relationships. How physical maintenance between sexual encounters involves cleaning, healing, and preparing for the next performance. This might include treating minor injuries, managing soreness or discomfort, and ensuring that your appearance meets standards despite whatever physical demands have been placed on your body. The recovery time between encounters is determined by your owner's schedule rather than your physical needs. The seasonal and social rhythms that affect sexual performance demands vary with your owner's circumstances. Religious festivals might increase or decrease sexual activity depending on the spiritual requirements. Political events might bring more visitors requiring entertainment. Economic pressures might result in sharing your services more frequently to maintain business relationships. Your workload fluctuates based on external factors that you can't predict or control. Documentation of your sexual performance might involve your owner discussing your abilities with other men, either as casual conversation or as part of negotiations if he's considering selling or trading you. Your reputation becomes a form of professional currency that affects your value in ways that are completely outside your control. Men you've never met might have opinions about your skills based on second-hand information from your owner. The relationship between sexual performance and emotional attachment creates complicated dynamics. Your owner might develop feelings for you that affect how he treats you, or he might deliberately avoid emotional connection to maintain the purely transactional nature of your relationship. You might develop feelings for him as a survival mechanism or psychological adaptation, or you might work to suppress any emotional attachment to protect yourself from additional vulnerability. When you're not performing your primary sexual duties, congratulations, you get to work a second job that involves maintaining the household where you're essentially a piece of expensive equipment. Your domestic responsibilities are comprehensive, physically demanding, and performed without any of the authority that typically comes with household management roles. You're simultaneously the worker and the tool, responsible for maintaining systems you have no control over and solving problems you didn't create. Cleaning in ancient Greece involves methods that would make modern janitors demand hazard pay and workers' compensation. There are no vacuum cleaners, no chemical cleaning products, and no running water in most homes. Instead, you scrub surfaces with rough brushes made from animal hair, sand that serves as an abrasive cleaner, and water that's been carried from community wells or cisterns. The floors are typically dirt, stone, or rough tile that requires constant maintenance to remain even marginally clean. Your cleaning supplies consist of whatever you can create from available materials. Soap, if it exists at all, is made from ash and animal fat, creating a caustic substance that cleans surfaces while destroying your hands. The texture is roughly equivalent to scrubbing with liquid sandpaper. Oil and vinegar serve as polish for bronze and copper surfaces, but the polishing process requires enough elbow grease to power a small chariot. Everything in the household accumulates layers of dust, soot, and grime that resist removal like they're personally attached to the surfaces. Laundry is a full contact sport that involves hauling water, heating it over fires, and beating clothes against rocks or rough surfaces until the dirt surrenders or the fabric disintegrates, whichever happens first. The soap situation applies here too. Your hands spend so much time in caustic water that they develop a permanent texture resembling well-worn leather. Drying clothes depends on weather conditions, available space, and hoping that nothing gets stolen while it's hanging outside. Food preparation occupies a significant portion of your day and involves processes that would challenge modern survival enthusiasts. Bread must be made from scratch, starting with grain that needs to be ground by hand using stone querns that require the upper body strength of a professional wrestler. The grinding process produces flour mixed with stone grit, giving every loaf the texture of edible concrete and the nutritional bonus of mineral supplements that slowly wear down your teeth. Cooking happens over open fires that provide no temperature control and require constant attention to prevent everything from burning or remaining dangerously undercooked. The kitchen equipment consists of clay pots that crack without warning, metal implements that heat up enough to brand you accidentally, and wooden tools that absorb flavors and bacteria from everything they touch. Food safety is optional, food preservation is hit or miss, and food poisoning is a regular risk that everyone accepts as part of daily life. Water management is a constant challenge that affects every aspect of household functioning. Water must be carried from public sources, stored in containers that eventually develop interesting ecosystems, and rationed carefully, because getting more requires physical labor and time. The water isn't clean by modern standards, it's whatever comes from wells, springs or cisterns that serve entire neighborhoods and double as community gathering places, where people share gossip, diseases, and various bodily fluids. Heating and lighting the household requires maintaining fires that are both essential for survival and potentially deadly if they spread. You're responsible for keeping fires at appropriate levels throughout the day, managing fuel supplies, and ensuring that the house doesn't burn down while everyone sleeps. Fuel consists of wood, charcoal, or oil, all of which produce smoke that turns the air inside most homes into something resembling a chronic campfire experience. Textile work involves spinning, weaving, mending, and creating fabric from raw materials like wool that arrives complete with sheep smell and various organic matter. The spinning process requires hand coordination and patience that would challenge modern fiber artists, while weaving involves operating looms that are essentially medieval engineering projects requiring mechanical skill and physical endurance. Mending clothes isn't a casual activity. It's reconstructive surgery performed on fabric using tools that would be recognized as torture devices in other contexts. Household pest control operates on the principle that you're sharing your living space with insects, rodents, and various other creatures that consider your food stores to be a public buffet. Mice and rats are permanent residents that require ongoing negotiation and trap management. Insects range from mildly annoying to actively dangerous, with some carrying diseases and others simply making life unpleasant through their enthusiasm for biting humans. Seasonal household maintenance involves preparing for weather changes that can range from merely uncomfortable to potentially lethal. Winter preparation includes securing food stores, repairing damage from the previous year, and ensuring that heating systems won't fail when freezing becomes a survival issue. Summer preparation involves managing heat, preserving food before it spoils, and dealing with increased insect activity that makes every meal an adventure in pest management. Managing household supplies requires tracking inventory, rationing resources, and making strategic decisions about when to use materials that are difficult or expensive to replace. You're responsible for knowing how much food is available, how long it might last, and what alternatives exist if supplies run short. This inventory management happens without spreadsheets, calculators, or any systematic tracking methods. It's all mental math and memory work. Waste management in ancient Greek households operates on principles that would horrify modern sanitation workers. Human waste goes into chamber pots that are emptied into streets or designated areas. Kitchen waste might be fed to animals, thrown into streets, or buried in areas that will later affect groundwater quality. Garbage doesn't disappear. It accumulates, rots, attracts animals, and becomes someone else's problem when the smell becomes unbearable. Childcare, if there are children in the household, involves responsibilities that extend beyond basic supervision. You might be expected to provide education, entertainment, discipline, and emotional support to children who aren't yours and whose futures are determined by decisions you have no input on. The children might be your owner's offspring from his wife or other relationships, creating complex family dynamics where your role is simultaneously important and completely subordinate. Guest management requires preparing the household for visitors who might arrive with little notice and expect hospitality that demonstrates your owner's wealth and status. This involves additional cleaning, food preparation, entertainment planning, and personal presentation that meets the expectations of people who might have influence over your future circumstances. Guests evaluate the household's management as a reflection of your owner's status, and your performance directly affects his reputation. Tool and equipment maintenance involves keeping household implements functional despite heavy use and limited replacement options. Knives need sharpening, pots need repairing, furniture needs fixing, and everything needs constant attention to prevent minor problems from becoming major failures. You learn basic repair skills, not because you're interested in craftsmanship, but because broken tools mean more difficult work and potentially unhappy owners. The coordination of all these domestic responsibilities happens without calendars, schedules, or time management systems. You track multiple ongoing projects, seasonal requirements, and daily necessities using memory and experience. The workload varies with seasons, household circumstances, and your owner's social obligations, but it never decreases to manageable levels. It simply shifts between different types of overwhelming responsibility. Occasionally, your owner decides to remind everyone in Athens how wealthy and sophisticated he is by hosting social gatherings where you serve as living proof of his refined taste and disposable income. These events transform you from background domestic worker into foreground entertainment, where your performance is evaluated by multiple audiences who all have different expectations and the power to influence your future circumstances. Think of it as being the main attraction at a party, where everyone's judging your performance, but you don't know the criteria for success. Preparation for social events begins days in advance and involves transforming both yourself and the household into showcase versions that represent your owner's status. Your beauty routine intensifies to levels that would challenge professional makeup artists working with modern cosmetics and good lighting. The goal is to achieve a level of perfection that makes other men envious of your owner's possessions and makes their own wives or concubines seem inadequate by comparison. Your wardrobe for these events consists of clothing designed to display wealth rather than provide comfort or practical functionality. The fabrics might be silk, fine linen, or other materials that signal expensive taste, but they're also delicate, restrictive, and completely inappropriate for any actual activity beyond standing attractively and moving gracefully. The jewelry you wear belongs to your owner and is selected to demonstrate his financial success rather than complement your personal style or coloring. The social dynamics of these gatherings operate like complicated theatre, where everyone knows their role except you're performing without a script. Male guests evaluate you as a reflection of your owner's taste and prosperity. They might engage you in conversation that tests your education, wit, and cultural knowledge, or they might ignore you completely while discussing your appearance, as if you're an art object that happens to be within hearing range. Female guests, when they're present, bring their own complex attitudes toward your situation. Wives might view you with suspicion, envy, or pity, depending on their own circumstances and personalities. Other concubines or heterae might see you as competition, potential alliance material, or simply another woman navigating similar challenges. Free women might treat you with polite distance, acknowledging your presence while maintaining social boundaries that protect their own reputations. Your conversation skills during these events must be sophisticated enough to entertain educated men while remaining appropriately deferential and never threatening their intellectual superiority. You're expected to be knowledgeable about poetry, music, philosophy, and current events, but not so knowledgeable that you make the male guests feel intellectually challenged or embarrassed. It's like being required to demonstrate intelligence while constantly dumbing yourself down to manageable levels. Musical performance might be part of your entertainment duties, requiring skills in singing, playing instruments, or dancing that showcase both your talents and your owner's investment in your cultural education. The instruments available include lyres, flutes, and percussion devices that require technique developed through practice time that might conflict with your other responsibilities. Your performances are evaluated not just on technical skill, but on your ability to enhance the social atmosphere and make the guests feel sophisticated and cultured. Dancing at these events involves choreography that emphasizes grace, sensuality, and cultural refinement, while avoiding anything that might be considered too overtly sexual or inappropriate for mixed company. The line between entertainment and impropriety shifts depending on the audience, the occasion, and the social standards of the particular guests. You're constantly calibrating your performance to match expectations you might not fully understand. Sexual availability during social events creates complicated dynamics that depend on your owner's intentions and the expectations of his guests. You might be expected to provide private services to important visitors as part of hospitality arrangements, or you might be strictly off limits to maintain your exclusive association with your owner. These arrangements are rarely communicated to you directly. You learn the rules through observation, subtle cues, and occasionally through mistakes that result in unpleasant consequences. Wine service at these gatherings involves more than simply pouring drinks. You're responsible for managing the alcohol consumption of guests, who might become unpredictable when intoxicated, maintaining the social atmosphere despite whatever personality changes emerge with drinking, and ensuring that everyone feels appropriately hosted without allowing the gathering to descend into chaos or inappropriate behavior. Conversation management requires monitoring multiple discussions simultaneously, while contributing appropriately to maintain social flow. You might need to redirect conversations that are becoming too heated, introduce topics that flatter particular guests, or simply provide intelligent listening that makes speakers feel heard and appreciated. Your social intelligence is constantly being evaluated by people who might recommend you to other potential owners or influence your current owner's opinion of your value. The ending of these social events involves cleanup, evaluation, and aftermath management that extends well beyond the departure of the last guest. Your performance is reviewed by your owner, who might provide feedback ranging from praise to criticism to physical punishment, depending on his assessment of how well you represented his interests. Guest reactions and comments become part of your reputation and might influence future social opportunities or restrictions. Networking opportunities during these events are limited, but potentially significant. You might encounter other women in similar situations who can provide advice, warnings, or friendship within the constraints of your circumstances. You might meet potential allies among the wives or free women who attend, though these relationships must be carefully managed to avoid threatening anyone's social position or marriage stability. The political undercurrents of these social gatherings often involve business negotiations, political alliances, and social positioning that affects your owner's circumstances and therefore your own security. Men might use these events to arrange marriages, business partnerships, or political support that could change your household's economic situation. Your ability to contribute positively to these negotiations through entertainment, conversation, or simply attractive presence can influence your own future circumstances. Gift exchanges at these events might involve your owner giving or receiving items that include jewelry, artwork, or other luxury goods that temporarily become part of your presentation wardrobe. You might also be involved in giving gifts to guests, serving as the attractive messenger who delivers items that enhance your owner's reputation for generosity and good taste. The seasonal and religious aspects of some social events require knowledge of cultural traditions, religious observances, and holiday customs that demonstrate your education and cultural sophistication. Your participation in these observances might involve special clothing, particular foods, specific behaviors, or ritual activities that showcase your owner's piety and cultural knowledge, while testing your own ability to perform appropriately in various contexts. Recovery from these social events involves returning to your normal routine while processing the social information, personal evaluations, and relationship dynamics that emerge during the gathering. The aftermath might include changes in your daily routine, modifications to your appearance or behavior based on feedback, or adjustments to your role within the household based on how successfully you performed during the social display. Let's discuss what passes for healthcare in ancient Greece, a system that operates on the advanced medical principle of try stuff and see what happens. Your health is simultaneously crucial to your value and completely dependent on treatments that range from ineffective to actively harmful. You're expected to maintain peak physical condition using medical knowledge that combines genuine herbal remedies, religious rituals, and ideas that would make modern doctors spontaneously develop headaches. Preventive healthcare consists mainly of hoping really hard that you don't get sick, because treatment options once you're ill range from unpleasant to potentially lethal. Your daily health maintenance involves strategies that your owner considers necessary to preserve his investment in your continued functionality. This might include dietary restrictions, exercise requirements, or exposure limitations that prioritize your appearance and performance capability over your personal comfort or long-term well-being. Menstrual management involves methods that would challenge modern women who have access to proper sanitation and comfortable products. You use cloth rags that must be washed and reused, creating ongoing laundry challenges and potential infection risks. The concept of disposable menstrual products doesn't exist, so you're constantly managing, cleaning, and maintaining textile solutions that provide minimal protection and maximum inconvenience. The social stigma around menstruation means you're expected to continue all normal activities while managing this process discreetly and without complaint. Dental care operates on the principle that tooth pain is a character-building experience that everyone should embrace enthusiastically. Tooth cleaning involves twigs that serve as primitive toothbrushes, providing roughly the same cleaning effectiveness as chewing on small branches. Pain management for dental problems consists of herbal remedies that might reduce inflammation or might simply make you too dizzy to notice that your teeth hurt. Tooth extraction is performed by people who learn their technique through trial and error on previous patients, using tools that would be equally effective for carpentry projects. Sexual health management involves strategies for preventing pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections that rely heavily on wishful thinking and herbal preparations of questionable effectiveness. Birth control methods include douches made from various acidic substances, inserted barriers made from materials that might prevent conception while definitely causing discomfort, and herbal preparations that might interfere with fertility while potentially causing liver damage or other systemic problems. Injury treatment depends on the severity of the problem and your owner's willingness to invest in medical care that might restore your functionality. Minor cuts and bruises are treated with whatever herbal remedies are available, often applied by people whose medical knowledge comes from folk traditions passed down through generations of similarly untrained practitioners. Major injuries might receive attention from actual physicians, assuming your owner considers you worth the expense, and the physician's schedule includes treating someone of your social status. Disease management operates on medical theories that combine observation, superstition, and educated guessing in proportions that vary with the practitioner's training and personal creativity. The four humours theory suggests that illness results from imbalances in blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, leading to treatments designed to restore balance through methods like bloodletting, purging, and dietary modifications that might or might not address the actual medical problem. Mental health support consists of whatever emotional resilience you can develop independently, because the concept of psychological care for people in your social position doesn't exist in any systematic way. Stress, anxiety, depression, and trauma are personal problems that you're expected to manage without interfering with your primary responsibilities. The psychological impact of your living situation is considered irrelevant as long as it doesn't affect your performance or appearance. Pregnancy, if it occurs, transforms your medical situation from maintaining an attractive woman to protecting valuable breeding stock. The quality of care you receive during pregnancy depends on whether your owner wants children and considers you worth the investment in maternal health care. Prenatal care consists of dietary advice, activity restrictions, and herbal preparations that might support healthy pregnancy or might cause complications that no one will understand until after the fact. Childbirth happens with the assistance of women who have experience delivering babies but not necessarily formal medical training. Pain management during labour consists of herbal preparations, physical positioning, and breathing techniques that provide whatever relief is possible without modern anaesthetics or surgical interventions. Complications during delivery are managed through methods that prioritise saving the baby over saving you, reflecting your relative value in the economic calculations that determine medical decision-making. Postpartum recovery involves physical healing, while resuming your normal responsibilities as quickly as possible. The concept of extended maternity leave doesn't exist when your absence from regular duties affects household functioning and your owner's comfort. Your body is expected to return to pre-pregnancy condition and sexual availability on a timeline determined by external expectations rather than your physical healing process. Chronic health conditions become long-term management challenges that affect your value and security. Conditions that interfere with your appearance, sexual performance, or general usefulness might result in reduced resources, modified responsibilities, or disposal when treatment costs exceed your remaining economic value. You learn to manage pain, discomfort, and illness while maintaining the appearance of health and capability. Aging involves managing the gradual deterioration of your physical condition while trying to maintain your market value for as long as possible. Joint pain, decreased energy, vision problems, and other age-related changes must be concealed or compensated for to avoid premature disposal. Your medical care focuses on maintaining your appearance and functionality rather than addressing the underlying aging process or preparing for comfortable elderly years. Epidemic diseases present particular challenges because quarantine and disease prevention methods are primitive and often ineffective. When interceived through communities, your exposure risk is determined by your owner's social activities and business obligations rather than your own health protection needs. Recovery from serious illness might leave you with permanent damage that affects your value and future prospects. Emergency medical care in crisis situations depends on available resources and competing priorities. If you're injured during social unrest, natural disasters, or household accidents, your treatment priority depends on your importance relative to other household members and your owner's immediate needs. Medical resources are allocated based on social status and economic value rather than medical urgency or human compassion. Medication access is limited to whatever herbal preparations, imported substances, or local remedies are available and affordable. Many effective treatments require ingredients that are expensive, rare, or simply unavailable in your geographic area. Your owner makes decisions about medical expenses based on cost-benefit calculations that weigh your continued functionality against the price of treatment. Eventually, despite your best efforts to remain valuable, attractive, and useful, you will reach the point where your owner considers you more expensive to maintain than you're worth keeping. This isn't a question of if, but when, and the timing depends on factors ranging from your aging process to your owner's financial circumstances to his personal preferences changing faster than Greek political alliances. Your disposal is handled with all the sentiment typically reserved for discarding worn-out furniture, which is to say, none whatsoever. The early warning signs of impending disposal are subtle but unmistakable once you learn to recognize them. Your clothing and jewelry allocations might decrease gradually, signaling that your owner is reducing his investment in your presentation. Your food portions might shrink, suggesting that maintaining your physical condition is no longer a priority. Your access to cosmetics, oils, and other beauty maintenance supplies might be restricted, indicating that your appearance standards are being lowered in preparation for transfer to someone with less demanding expectations. Your owner's behavior toward you shifts from investment maintenance to liquidation preparation. He might become less concerned with your comfort, health, or emotional state, treating you more like property that's scheduled for disposal than like a person whose well-being affects his own interests. Conversations about your future disappear entirely, replaced by an atmosphere of temporary utility that signals your time in this household is measured in months rather than years. The methods of disposal vary depending on your owner's financial situation, your remaining market value, and the local demand for women in your age and condition category. Sale to another household is the most common option, transferring you to someone who might have different standards, expectations, or treatment approaches. The sale process involves evaluation by potential buyers who examine your physical condition, test your skills, and negotiate your price based on their assessment of your remaining useful life. Auction represents the ultimate commodification of your existence, where you're displayed publicly for evaluation by anyone with sufficient funds and interest in acquiring you. The auction process strips away any pretense that you're anything other than property, as strangers examine your body, discuss your attributes and defects, and bid on your future based on their calculations of your utility versus your cost. Being given as a gift transfers you to someone who might not have actively sought to acquire you, creating uncertainty about how your new owner will integrate you into his household, or what expectations he might have for your services. Gift transfers often involve political or business relationships that affect how you'll be treated. You might be valued as a generous present, or you might be considered a burden that must be accepted for social reasons. Abandonment is the disposal method for owners who can't find buyers willing to pay what they consider acceptable prices for your remaining value. Abandonment leaves you without resources, protection, or legal status in a society that offers few survival options for women without male support. You join the population of displaced women who compete for extremely limited opportunities in prostitution, domestic service, or marginal economic activities that barely provide subsistence. The timing of disposal often coincides with changes in your owner's circumstances, rather than dramatic changes in your condition or performance. Marriage, financial difficulties, political problems, or simple boredom might trigger disposal decisions that have nothing to do with your value or behavior. You might be performing your duties satisfactorily while still being considered expendable due to external factors beyond your control. Age-related disposal typically occurs when your physical deterioration reaches levels that affect your primary functions. Decreased attractiveness, reduced energy, health problems, or simply looking older than your owner prefers might trigger replacement with younger women who represent better long-term investments. The specific age threshold varies with individual owners and market conditions, but the direction is always downward. Pregnancy can either delay or accelerate disposal depending on your owner's attitude toward children and your potential value as a mother. Wanted pregnancies might extend your useful life by transitioning your role from sexual entertainment to reproductive function. Unwanted pregnancies might result in immediate disposal to avoid the expenses and complications of child rearing. The decision isn't yours to make. Illness or injury that permanently affects your appearance, capabilities, or health can trigger immediate disposal if treatment costs exceed your projected remaining value. Chronic conditions that require ongoing medical care, physical disabilities that limit your functionality, or diseases that affect your attractiveness might result in sale to buyers who specialize in managing women with reduced market value. Behavioral problems, whether real or perceived, can result in disposal even when your physical condition remains acceptable. Owners who consider you insufficiently compliant, overly demanding, or emotionally difficult might decide that managing your personality isn't worth the effort required. The definition of problematic behavior is entirely subjective and might include anything from expressing opinions to showing insufficient enthusiasm for your duties. Replacement economics drive many disposal decisions. When owners have opportunities to acquire women, they consider improvements over your capabilities, appearance, or age. Your disposal might be triggered not by any deficiency in your performance, but by your owner's access to someone he prefers. You're replaced like any other household item when better options become available. Market fluctuations affect disposal timing and methods based on supply and demand conditions in the local trade for women in your category. Economic downturns might accelerate disposal when owners reduce expenses by eliminating what they consider luxury spending. Economic improvements might delay disposal when owners can afford to maintain larger households. Legal complications can force disposal when your owner's circumstances change in ways that make keeping you impractical or impossible. Political exile, criminal prosecution, or civil lawsuits might require rapid liquidation of assets, including you. These forced disposals often result in sales to whoever offers immediate payment rather than optimal placement. Preparation for disposal involves reducing your owner's investment in your maintenance while maximizing your appeal to potential buyers. This might include basic grooming and healthcare to maintain your presentation value, but without the ongoing investment in luxury items or extensive beauty treatments that characterized your time as a valued possession. The emotional impact of impending disposal creates psychological stress that you must manage while continuing to perform your duties satisfactorily. Anxiety about your future circumstances, grief over losing whatever security your current situation provided, and fear about unknown new arrangements must be suppressed to avoid giving your owner additional reasons to consider you problematic. Documentation of disposal might involve transfer of ownership papers, records of your training and capabilities, or references that affect your treatment by subsequent owners. Your reputation and service history become part of the transaction, influencing your future circumstances through information that follows you from one situation to the next. The final transition from your current household to whatever comes next happens quickly once disposal decisions are made. You might have hours or days to adjust to the reality that your life is changing completely, with no input from you about the timing, destination, or terms of your new arrangement. Your possessions, if you have any, might transfer with you or might remain with your previous owner, depending on what was considered his property versus what might be considered yours. While most trajectories for concubines in ancient Greece follow a predictable downward spiral from youth through decline to disposal, there are occasional alternative paths that offer different forms of misery, or rarely, something that might charitably be called improvement. These alternatives aren't exactly escape routes. Think of them more like different flavors of the same basic situation, with varying levels of autonomy, security, and dignity. None of them involve complete freedom or control over your circumstances, but some are objectively less terrible than others. Religious service represents one of the few socially acceptable transitions that doesn't automatically result in destitution or death. Some temples employ women in various capacities that provide food, shelter, and social protection, while requiring different forms of service than domestic concubinage. Your role might involve maintaining temple facilities, participating in religious ceremonies, or providing services to male priests that are essentially identical to your previous work, but with divine justification. The main advantage is social respectability and institutional protection. The main disadvantage is that religious institutions can be even more controlling than individual owners. Temple prostitution, where it exists, offers a different economic model that might provide more security than private arrangements. Your services are still sexual, but they're integrated into religious practices that provide social legitimacy and institutional oversight. The income generated might be shared with you in small amounts, creating the illusion of earning wages for your work. The clientele might be more diverse, potentially including men who treat sacred prostitutes with more respect than they show private concubines, though this isn't guaranteed. Transition to conventional prostitution represents lateral movement that trades the security of a single owner for the uncertainty of multiple clients. Professional prostitution might offer more variety in your daily experiences and potentially higher earnings that provide some economic independence, but it also increases your exposure to violence, disease, and social stigma. The work involves similar activities, but with less predictable working conditions and no guaranteed shelter or protection. Marriage, though rare, occasionally occurs when owners develop genuine emotional attachments or when political or economic circumstances make formal marriage beneficial. Marriage provides legal protection, social status, and family connections that improve your security, but it also involves different restrictions and expectations that might be more or less burdensome than concubinage. Your husband gains legal authority over you that replaces your owner's control with different forms of constraint. Manumission, or formal release from ownership, might occur at your owner's death, during religious festivals, or as rewards for exceptional service. Free status provides legal protection and the right to make decisions about your own life, but it doesn't automatically provide resources, skills, or social connections necessary for independent survival. Freedom without economic support often leads to poverty-level existence that might be worse than comfortable dependency. Entrepreneurial opportunities exist for women with specific skills, connections, or resources that enable independent economic activity. You might establish small businesses in food preparation, textile work, cosmetics, or other trades that serve female clientele. Success requires business knowledge, initial capital, and social networks that most concubines don't develop during their service years. The failure rate is high, and unsuccessful businesses often lead to poverty or return to dependent relationships. Informal partnerships with craftsmen, merchants, or other working men might provide relationship stability without formal marriage. These arrangements offer companionship and shared resources while avoiding some of the legal restrictions of marriage. The men involved might be slaves, foreigners, or free citizens with limited resources who can't afford formal wives but can provide protection and economic cooperation that improves your survival prospects. Educational opportunities, though extremely limited, might enable transitions to roles that require literacy, mathematical skills, or cultural knowledge. Women with these capabilities might find work as tutors for female children, record keepers for businesses, or assistants in administrative roles that provide income and social respectability. Educational development usually requires years of preparation and access to learning opportunities that aren't available to most concubines. Artistic careers in music, dance, or poetry might provide alternative income sources and social positioning that improves your long-term prospects. Professional entertainers with established reputations can command higher fees and more respectful treatment than sexual service providers, though the markets for artistic services are limited and highly competitive. Success requires exceptional talent, training opportunities, and social connections that facilitate career development. Geographic relocation might offer opportunities unavailable in your current location, though moving requires resources and connections that enable travel and establishment in new communities. Different cities have varying economic opportunities, social structures, and cultural attitudes that might provide better circumstances for women in your situation. Migration is risky and expensive, but sometimes represents the only path to improved conditions. Patronage relationships with wealthy women might provide alternative support systems that don't involve sexual services. Free women with resources occasionally maintain female dependents who provide companionship, assistance, or specialized services that improve their own lives. These arrangements can offer security and social protection while avoiding some of the vulnerabilities associated with male ownership. Communal living arrangements with other women in similar circumstances might provide shared resources and mutual protection that improves everyone's survival prospects. Cooperative households enable resource pooling, shared labor, and group security that individuals can't achieve alone. These arrangements require compatible personalities and shared goals, but they can create support systems that provide stability during difficult transitions. Skill development in trades that serve female clientele might create economic opportunities that don't require male approval or support. Midwifery, herbalism, cosmetics preparation, and textile arts provide services that women need regardless of their social status. These careers require specialized knowledge and reputation development that takes years to establish, but they offer independence and social value that improves long-term security. Wealthy widow arrangements occasionally provide security through relationships with older women who need companionship and assistance managing their households. Widows with inherited wealth might maintain female companions who provide social interaction, domestic management, and emotional support in exchange for housing, food, and protection. These relationships can offer stability and respectability while avoiding sexual service requirements. Political connections, though dangerous to develop, might provide protection and opportunities through relationships with influential men or their families. Women who understand political dynamics and can navigate complex social relationships might find ways to leverage these connections for improved circumstances. Political involvement requires discretion and sophistication that few concubines develop, and the risks include becoming targets during political upheavals. The transition timing for these alternative paths depends on factors like your age, health, skills, connections, and available opportunities. Most transitions happen during crisis periods when your current situation becomes unsustainable, leaving little time for careful planning or preparation. Success requires recognizing opportunities quickly and acting decisively when windows of possibility open briefly. Preparation for alternative paths involves developing skills, relationships, and resources while still maintaining your current responsibilities satisfactorily. This dual existence requires careful time management and discretion to avoid threatening your current security while building foundations for potential changes. The preparation process might take years and still result in failure if circumstances don't align properly. The psychological challenges of transition involve adjusting expectations, developing new social skills, and adapting to different forms of constraint or freedom. Moving from one situation to another requires emotional resilience and adaptability that your previous experiences might not have prepared you for. Identity shifts from someone's concubine to whatever your new role requires can be disorienting and difficult. Success factors for alternative paths include timing, luck, personal capabilities, available resources, and social support systems that most women in your situation lack. The women who successfully transition to better circumstances often combine exceptional personal qualities with fortunate external conditions that create opportunities. Most attempts at lateral movement fail and result in worse circumstances than the original situation. Risk assessment for alternative paths involves weighing potential improvements against the security of known circumstances, even when those circumstances are unpleasant or restrictive. The familiar problems of your current situation might be preferable to unknown risks associated with change. Conservative choices often make more sense than optimistic ventures that could result in catastrophic failure. Long-term sustainability of alternative arrangements depends on factors beyond your control, including economic conditions, social changes, political stability, and the continued goodwill of people who provide your new circumstances. Even successful transitions don't guarantee permanent improvement, and women who achieve better situations might still face future displacement or deterioration of their conditions. Living as a concubine in ancient Greece requires developing survival strategies that address both immediate physical needs and long-term psychological sustainability. Your daily existence involves constant calculations about safety, resource management, relationship navigation, and emotional protection that would exhaust modern crisis counselors. These aren't strategies for thriving, they're techniques for enduring circumstances that would break most people while maintaining enough functionality to avoid making your situation worse. Information gathering becomes a crucial survival skill that involves listening carefully to conversations, observing behavioral patterns, and collecting data about household dynamics, your owner's business circumstances, and potential threats or opportunities. You learn to be invisible when important conversations happen, memorizing details that might affect your future while appearing completely uninterested in anything beyond your immediate duties. Knowledge about your owner's financial situation, political connections, health problems, or family relationships can help you anticipate changes that will affect your circumstances. Emotional compartmentalization allows you to separate your authentic feelings from your performance requirements, protecting your psychological core while meeting external expectations. You develop multiple personality layers that can be activated as needed: the enthusiastic lover, the attentive servant, the intelligent companion, the decorative object, while keeping your real thoughts and emotions safely locked away where they can't be damaged by daily humiliations and violations. Alliance building with other household members creates support networks that provide information, assistance, and emotional connection within the constraints of your circumstances. Relationships with other slaves, servants, and concubines can offer mutual protection, shared resources, and psychological support that makes daily life more bearable. These alliances require careful management to avoid threatening anyone's individual security or creating conflicts that could result in punishment for everyone involved. Resource hoarding involves accumulating small advantages that might provide security during emergencies or opportunities during transitions. This might include saving tiny amounts of food, hiding small valuable items, developing skills that aren't immediately useful, or maintaining relationships that could provide assistance in crisis situations. The hoarding must be subtle enough to avoid detection, while significant enough to provide actual benefits when needed. Conflict avoidance strategies help you navigate household tensions, personality clashes, and competitive dynamics without becoming the target of other people's frustrations or ambitions. You learn to recognize early warning signs of problems, redirect negative emotions away from yourself, and position yourself as helpful rather than threatening to other household members. Sometimes this means accepting blame for problems you didn't cause, or sacrificing your own interests to maintain household harmony. Performance optimization involves constantly refining your skills in areas that determine your value, whether that's sexual techniques, domestic capabilities, social graces, or entertainment abilities. You study your owner's preferences and adapt your behavior to maximize his satisfaction while minimizing your own discomfort. This requires ongoing attention to subtle feedback and willingness to modify your approach based on results. Health maintenance using limited resources involves protecting your physical condition through careful diet management, exercise when possible, injury prevention, and basic medical care using whatever materials are available. You learn to treat minor health problems independently, manage chronic conditions without medical support, and maintain your appearance despite nutritional deficiencies and physical stress. Social intelligence development enables you to read people accurately, predict their behavior, and influence their attitudes toward you in ways that improve your treatment or expand your opportunities. You study personality types, power dynamics, and social hierarchies to understand how different people respond to various approaches. This intelligence gathering helps you avoid dangerous people and cultivate relationships with those who might be helpful. Flexibility training, both physical and psychological, prepares you to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, new requirements, or unexpected challenges. Your situation can change instantly based on your owner's decisions, external events, or crisis situations that require immediate adjustment. Mental flexibility helps you accept these changes without psychological breakdown, while physical flexibility helps you meet new demands without injury. Risk management involves constantly evaluating potential threats and taking preventive measures to avoid situations that could result in punishment, injury, or disposal. You learn to recognize dangerous moods, avoid triggering topics, and position yourself advantageously when conflicts arise. Risk assessment becomes an automatic background process that influences every decision and interaction. Memory techniques help you retain important information about people, events, and circumstances that might become relevant to your survival. You develop systems for remembering names, preferences, schedules, and relationship dynamics that enable you to provide appropriate responses and avoid mistakes that could have serious consequences. Good memory also helps you track your own experiences and maintain some sense of personal continuity despite constant external changes. Stress management, using available methods, helps you maintain psychological stability despite ongoing trauma, uncertainty, and powerlessness. This might involve breathing techniques, mental exercises, physical movement, or spiritual practices that provide emotional relief without requiring external resources. You learn to manage anxiety, depression, and despair well enough to continue functioning without attracting negative attention. Communication skills enable you to express yourself appropriately in different contexts while protecting your interests and avoiding misunderstandings that could create problems. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent, how to phrase requests to maximize success, and how to provide information that serves your purposes without appearing manipulative or threatening. Time management involves making the most efficient use of whatever autonomy you have while meeting all external expectations satisfactorily. You learn to accomplish multiple tasks simultaneously, prioritize competing demands, and find moments for personal activities within schedules that are largely controlled by other people. Future planning, despite your limited control over circumstances, involves identifying potential opportunities, developing contingency plans, and preparing for various scenarios that might arise. You can't control what happens to you, but you can prepare responses that maximize your chances of survival and minimize damage when changes occur. Identity preservation requires maintaining some sense of self, despite circumstances that constantly reinforce your status as property rather than person. You develop internal narratives, private thoughts, and personal values that provide psychological anchoring when external circumstances become overwhelming. This inner self becomes a refuge that can't be touched by daily humiliations and violations. Hope management involves maintaining enough optimism to continue survival efforts, while avoiding expectations that could lead to devastating disappointment. You learn to hope for small improvements rather than dramatic rescue, to appreciate temporary pleasures without becoming dependent on them, and to maintain motivation for self-preservation without believing that fundamental change is possible. Violence in the life of a concubine isn't an occasional threat. It's a constant environmental factor that shapes every interaction, decision, and relationship. The violence you experience operates on multiple levels, from subtle psychological intimidation to outright physical assault, and it serves as the enforcement mechanism that maintains your compliance with a system designed to extract maximum value from your existence, while providing minimum security for your well-being. Physical violence from your owner might be calculated punishment for perceived failures, spontaneous expressions of frustration or anger, or simply recreational entertainment that demonstrates his complete power over your body. The violence isn't necessarily related to your behavior or performance. Sometimes you're simply a convenient target for emotions generated by business problems, political stress, or personal dissatisfaction that have nothing to do with you. Sexual violence represents a category of abuse that's considered normal and acceptable within the framework of your relationship with your owner. The concept of consent doesn't apply to your situation, so sexual acts that would be considered rape if performed on free women are simply part of your expected duties when performed on you. The physical and psychological damage from ongoing sexual violence is cumulative and affects your mental health, physical condition, and ability to form genuine emotional connections. Domestic violence from other household members creates additional layers of threat that you must navigate carefully. Other slaves might see you as competition for resources or favor, leading to conflicts that could escalate to physical confrontation. Wives or free women in the household might view you as a threat to their own security, resulting in subtle or overt hostility that could include physical attacks when opportunities arise. Violence from guests or visitors represents unpredictable threats that depend on your owner's willingness to protect his property versus his desire to maintain social relationships. Guests who abuse you might face consequences if your owner values you highly. or they might be encouraged to continue if your owner considers their friendship more important than your well-being. Your safety during social events depends entirely on calculations that don't include your own preferences or welfare. The threat of violence is often more controlling than actual violence, because the possibility of punishment affects every decision you make throughout each day. You modify your behavior, speech, and even thoughts based on avoiding actions that might trigger violent responses. This constant vigilance and self-censorship becomes an automatic background process that exhausts your mental resources and limits your ability to think clearly about your circumstances. Legal protection from violence is essentially non-existent, since you're not considered a person with rights, but rather property that belongs to someone else. Crimes committed against you are treated as crimes against your owner's property, and the punishment depends on the perpetrator's social status relative to your owner's status. Violence from people of higher social rank might be ignored entirely, while violence from social inferiors might be punished severely. Self-defense options are extremely limited because defending yourself against free citizens could result in penalties that range from severe punishment to execution. You might be able to defend yourself against other slaves or servants, but only if you can do so without causing injuries that affect their ability to work or creating household disruptions that inconvenience your owner. Reporting violence involves complex calculations about whether seeking help will improve your situation or make it worse. Complaining about treatment might result in protection if your owner values you highly and considers the abuse damage to his property. More often, complaints are seen as evidence that you're causing problems and need additional discipline to improve your attitude and compliance. Medical care after violence depends on the severity of your injuries and your owner's assessment of whether treatment is worth the expense. Minor injuries might be ignored completely, while serious injuries that affect your functionality might receive attention to preserve your value. Permanent damage that reduces your attractiveness or capabilities might result in disposal rather than expensive medical treatment. Psychological trauma from ongoing violence affects your mental health in ways that weren't understood or addressed by ancient Greek medicine. You develop symptoms that would be recognized today as PTSD, depression, anxiety disorders, and dissociative conditions, but these psychological responses are considered personal weaknesses rather than predictable results of sustained abuse. You're expected to function normally despite trauma that would disable most people. Violence as social control extends beyond your immediate household to the broader community, where public punishment of slaves and concubines serves as entertainment and warning to others in similar situations. Public floggings, humiliation, and other forms of community violence reinforce the social hierarchy and demonstrate the consequences of resistance or non-compliance. Escalation patterns in household violence often follow predictable cycles that you learn to recognize and navigate. Your owner's stress levels, drinking habits, financial problems, and social pressures create conditions that increase the likelihood of violent episodes. Understanding these patterns helps you take protective measures when possible and avoid triggering incidents during high-risk periods. Protection strategies involve positioning yourself advantageously during potentially dangerous situations, cultivating relationships with people who might intervene on your behalf, and developing escape plans for emergencies. These strategies require constant attention to social dynamics and environmental factors that might affect your safety. Solidarity with other victims provides mutual support and protection when possible, though competition for resources and survival often prevents effective cooperation. Women in similar situations might share information about dangerous individuals, provide assistance during recovery from violence, or simply offer emotional support that acknowledges the reality of your shared experiences. Normalizing of violence affects your psychological adaptation to circumstances that should be unacceptable to anyone. You learn to consider certain levels of abuse normal and acceptable, adjusting your expectations downward to maintain psychological stability. This adaptation helps you survive, but also makes it difficult to recognize opportunities for improvement or to maintain hope for better treatment. Intergenerational violence affects women who have children in these circumstances, creating additional vulnerabilities and moral dilemmas. Protecting children from violence might require accepting additional abuse yourself, while your own victimization affects your ability to provide emotional support and security for children who are growing up in the same violent environment. Recovery from violence must happen without external support, medical care, or recognition that you've been injured rather than appropriately disciplined. You develop self-treatment methods for physical injuries and psychological coping mechanisms for emotional trauma that help you continue functioning despite ongoing damage to your health and well-being. The cumulative effects of sustained violence create long-term changes in your personality, behavior, and physical condition that affect every aspect of your existence. Chronic pain, hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and social withdrawal become permanent features of your life that persist even during periods of relative safety. Resistance to violence must be carefully calculated to avoid consequences that are worse than the original abuse. Direct resistance often results in escalated punishment, while passive resistance might provide some protection without triggering severe retaliation. The most effective resistance strategies are often invisible to perpetrators and involve protecting your psychological core rather than your physical body. The experience of being a concubine in ancient Greece varies significantly, depending on your geographic location, the specific time period, local customs, and regional economic conditions. What passes for normal treatment in Athens might be considered unusually harsh in Corinth, while practices that are acceptable in Sparta might be shocking to residents of more traditional city-states. Understanding these cultural variations helps explain why your circumstances might be better or worse than other women in similar situations elsewhere. Athenian concubinage operates within a cultural framework that emphasizes intellectual sophistication, political complexity, and economic prosperity that affects how women in your position are treated and valued. Athens values education, artistic achievement, and cultural refinement, which might provide opportunities for concubines who possess these qualities, but also creates pressure to maintain high standards of performance in areas beyond basic sexual service. The Athenian hetaira system represents a specialized category of high-class concubinage that provides more social status and economic security than typical arrangements. Hetairai are expected to be conversationalists, entertainers, and cultural companions who enhance their patrons' social standing through wit, education, and sophistication. This elevated status comes with increased expectations and responsibilities that require extensive preparation and ongoing skill development. Spartan attitudes toward women's roles and physical fitness create different expectations for concubines in that region. Spartan culture values physical strength, military readiness, and practical skills that might provide alternative paths for women who don't fit traditional domestic roles. The Spartan emphasis on producing strong children affects how pregnancy and motherhood are valued in concubine relationships. Corinthian commercial culture creates opportunities and challenges related to the city's position as a major trading center with diverse international influences. The cosmopolitan atmosphere might provide exposure to different cultural practices and opportunities for learning skills that are valuable in commercial contexts. The presence of foreign merchants and travelers affects the market for women's services and the cultural expectations that shape daily life. Island communities with limited resources and isolated populations create different survival challenges and opportunities for women in dependent relationships. Small communities provide less anonymity and fewer alternatives, but they also create more intimate social networks where relationships and reputation might provide some protection and security. Religious festivals and cultural celebrations affect the rhythm of life and provide temporary changes in routine that might improve or worsen your circumstances. Religious observances might require additional work preparing for celebrations, participating in rituals, or serving increased numbers of guests. Some religious festivals include traditions that affect women's status or provide temporary respite from normal duties. Economic cycles affect your treatment and security based on your owner's financial circumstances and the broader economic conditions in your region. Prosperous periods might result in better food, clothing, and living conditions, while economic difficulties might lead to reduced resources, increased pressure to generate income, or disposal when luxury expenses must be eliminated. Political instability creates additional dangers and uncertainties that affect your daily life and long-term prospects. Wars, regime changes, and civil conflicts can result in rapid changes in your circumstances, from temporary displacement to permanent changes in ownership. Political refugees and displaced populations affect local economic conditions and social dynamics. Cultural attitudes toward foreign women create different treatment patterns for concubines from other regions or countries. Exotic origins might increase your value in some contexts, while making you more vulnerable in others. Language barriers, cultural differences, and lack of local family connections affect your ability to navigate social relationships and find alternative support systems. Legal variations between different city-states affect your rights, protections, and options for addressing problems or seeking assistance. Some regions have more developed legal frameworks for protecting slaves and dependents, while others operate with minimal legal constraints on how owners treat their property. These legal differences affect your safety and the possibilities for improving your circumstances. Trade relationships and cultural exchange expose you to different ideas about women's roles, treatment of dependents, and social arrangements that might provide examples of alternative ways of life. Contact with merchants, travelers, and foreign residents might offer information about different cultural practices or opportunities for geographic relocation. Seasonal variations affect your working conditions, health challenges, and daily responsibilities based on regional climate patterns and agricultural cycles. Harsh winters might create heating and food challenges, while hot summers might increase health risks and working difficulties. Agricultural seasons affect household rhythms and economic pressures that influence your treatment. Military campaigns and their aftermath affect household composition, resource availability, and social dynamics when men leave for extended periods or return with different needs and expectations. Military victories might bring wealth and captured women who compete for resources, while military defeats might result in economic hardship and political instability. Social class variations within your owner's community affect his status aspirations and the performance standards he sets for demonstrating his wealth and sophistication. Competition with other wealthy men might require higher investment in your appearance and education, while lower social expectations might result in more basic treatment and fewer opportunities for skill development. Rural versus urban settings create different daily experiences, social networks, and economic opportunities that affect your quality of life and future prospects. Rural households might offer more physical space and natural beauty, but fewer cultural opportunities and alternative arrangements. Urban environments provide more social interaction and economic diversity, but also increased competition and social complexity. Cultural changes over time affect the expectations and treatment patterns for women in your situation as social attitudes evolve and new ideas about women's roles and capabilities develop. Generational differences between older and younger men might result in different treatment approaches based on changing cultural values and social expectations. Regional specializations in crafts, agriculture, or trade create different opportunities for skill development and alternative career paths that might provide economic independence or improved circumstances. Communities known for textile production, pottery, metalwork, or other crafts might offer training opportunities and markets for women's specialized labor. Immigration patterns and cultural mixing in cosmopolitan areas expose you to different traditions, languages, and social practices that might provide educational opportunities or alternative cultural frameworks for understanding your situation. Diverse communities might offer more tolerance for unconventional arrangements or different pathways for social mobility. Religious diversity and competing spiritual traditions affect your access to different forms of community support, cultural identity, and potential protection through religious institutions. Different deities and religious practices might provide alternative sources of meaning and community connection that help sustain psychological resilience during difficult periods. The inevitable process of aging as a concubine in ancient Greece represents a gradual transition from valuable commodity to expensive burden, with each passing year bringing decreased desirability and increased vulnerability. Your body becomes a calendar that everyone can read, marking time until you become too costly to maintain relative to the services you can provide. The aging process isn't just about physical deterioration, it's about watching your social value, economic utility, and personal security decrease automatically and irreversibly. Physical changes affect every aspect of your existence, as your body shows the accumulated effects of years of physical demands, inadequate nutrition, exposure to toxic cosmetics, and limited medical care. Your skin loses the firmness and smoothness that once attracted admirers, developing lines, discoloration and texture changes that signal decreased fertility and reduced sexual appeal. Your hair thins, greys or changes texture, despite continued use of dyes and treatments that become less effective with each application. Energy levels decline as your body struggles to maintain the physical demands of domestic labor, sexual performance, and social entertainment that defined your younger years. Tasks that once seemed manageable become increasingly difficult, requiring more time and effort to complete to your owner's satisfaction. The physical stamina required for extended sexual encounters, long periods of standing during social events, and constant household maintenance becomes harder to sustain. Health problems accumulate as your body responds to years of stress, poor nutrition, toxic cosmetic exposure, and physical trauma that weren't properly treated when they occurred. Chronic pain from old injuries affects your mobility and performance, while digestive problems, dental issues, and other age-related conditions create ongoing discomfort that you must manage without adequate medical care. Your owner's attitude toward you shifts gradually from investment maintenance to cost-benefit analysis as he evaluates whether keeping you remains economically sensible. Comments about your appearance become more critical. Expectations for your performance might increase to compensate for decreased attractiveness, or your responsibilities might shift toward more domestic labor and less entertainment as your sexual value declines. Competition from younger women becomes increasingly threatening, as your owner gains access to concubines who offer the physical attributes and energy levels that you can no longer provide. New additions to the household serve as constant reminders of your declining status and increasing replaceability. The comparison isn't subtle, it's a daily demonstration of your decreasing value in a market that prioritizes youth above experience or skill. Social invisibility increases as you become less interesting to guests and visitors who once sought your company for conversation, entertainment, or sexual services. Your opinions are solicited less frequently. Your presence at social events becomes optional rather than required, and your role shifts from featured entertainment to background domestic support. The transition from being noticed to being ignored happens gradually, but inexorably. Economic anxiety becomes a constant factor as you calculate how much longer your owner might consider you worth maintaining versus the cost of feeding, housing, and caring for someone whose productivity is declining. Every household expense crisis, every new financial pressure, and every sign of your owner's economic difficulties triggers fear that you might be among the first expenses to be eliminated. Skill adaptation involves developing capabilities that remain valuable despite physical aging, such as household management, food preparation, textile work, or childcare that doesn't require the physical attributes of youth. These alternative skills might extend your useful life, but often involve transitioning to lower status work that provides less security and comfort than your previous role. Relationship changes with other household members reflect your declining status as they adjust their behavior based on your reduced influence and protection. Other slaves might show less deference, competitors might become more openly hostile, and allies might distance themselves to avoid association with someone whose circumstances are deteriorating. Psychological adaptation to declining status requires developing coping mechanisms that help you accept reduced circumstances while maintaining enough self-worth to continue survival efforts. The identity shifts involved in transitioning from valued companion to aging burden create emotional challenges that must be managed without external psychological support. Memory preservation becomes important as your experiences and knowledge represent the only assets that truly belong to you. Maintaining mental clarity and cognitive function provides some protection against complete disposability, while memory loss accelerates your transition to burdensome dependent status that offers few survival options. Preparation for disposal involves recognizing the warning signs that your time in your current situation is ending and developing whatever contingency plans are possible within your limited resources and options. This might include cultivating relationships that could provide alternative support, developing skills that might enable independent survival, or simply accepting the reality that your future circumstances will be determined entirely by other people's decisions. Alternative arrangements for aging concubines vary depending on cultural practices, family traditions, and individual circumstances. Some owners maintain aging concubines in reduced circumstances out of sentiment, habit, or religious obligation, Others arrange transfers to family members who might have different needs or expectations. Religious institutions might accept some aging women as servants or dependents. Health management during aging requires developing strategies for maintaining functionality, despite increasing physical problems and decreasing access to medical care. This involves learning to treat common age-related conditions with available remedies, managing chronic pain and discomfort, and recognizing serious health problems that require immediate attention. Social transition planning involves adjusting expectations and developing relationships that might provide support during vulnerable elderly years. This might include connections with younger women who could provide assistance, relationships with religious institutions that offer some protection, or simply accepting that elderly years will be spent in whatever circumstances your owner or his successors consider appropriate. Legacy considerations involve determining what, if anything, you might be able to pass on to younger women who could benefit from your experience and knowledge. Teaching skills, sharing survival strategies, or simply providing emotional support to women facing similar challenges might provide some sense of purpose during your declining years. End-of-life realities involve accepting that your death will be handled according to your owner's convenience and cultural practices, rather than your own preferences or religious beliefs. Your final resting place, any memorial or remembrance, and the disposal of any personal possessions will be determined by people who see your death primarily as a household management issue, rather than the end of a human life. The psychological impact of facing decline and death without autonomy or dignity requires developing spiritual or philosophical frameworks that provide meaning and comfort despite circumstances that offer little hope for improvement. Finding ways to maintain human dignity and personal worth when society provides neither recognition nor support becomes the final challenge of a life spent in service to others who controlled your circumstances from beginning to end. As we reach the end of our journey through the daily realities of being a concubine in ancient Greece, it's worth reflecting on how completely different this historical truth is from the popular cultural narratives that suggest these women lived lives of luxury, influence, and romantic fulfillment. The gap between myth and reality isn't just significant, it's a chasm that separates fantasy from the brutal facts of systematic exploitation, economic vulnerability, and human beings treated as disposable property. The romanticized version of ancient Greek concubinage, perpetuated by centuries of male historians and modern popular culture, focuses on exceptional women like Aspasia or Phryne who achieved unusual prominence and influence. These exceptional cases are presented as typical experiences, creating the impression that most concubines lived as powerful, educated, wealthy women who chose their circumstances and controlled their destinies. This narrative serves to justify and minimize a system of exploitation by pretending it was actually beneficial to the women involved. The reality we've explored reveals a system designed to extract maximum value from women's bodies, labor, and talents, while providing minimum security, autonomy, or compensation. Every aspect of a concubine's existence, from daily routines to long-term prospects, was shaped by her fundamental status as property owned by men who could dispose of her whenever it became economically or personally convenient. The system provided no protection from violence, no guarantee of basic necessities, and no path to independence or security. The economic mathematics of concubinage created impossible contradictions, where women were expected to maintain their value through expensive beauty routines and health maintenance, while having no control over the resources necessary for these activities. They were required to demonstrate intelligence and education while being denied access to learning opportunities. They needed to show loyalty and devotion to people who viewed them as replaceable assets, rather than human beings worthy of care or consideration. The social dynamics surrounding concubinage created competitive environments where women were forced to compete against each other for resources that were deliberately kept scarce. The system prevented solidarity and mutual support by making every other woman a potential threat to one's own survival. This artificial scarcity served the interests of owners who benefited from women's desperation and willingness to accept increasingly poor treatment to maintain their positions. The violence that characterized these relationships wasn't incidental or exceptional. It was the enforcement mechanism that made the entire system function. Physical abuse, sexual coercion, emotional manipulation, and the constant threat of abandonment kept women compliant with arrangements that served only their owners' interests. The normalization of this violence in ancient Greek culture reflects broader attitudes toward women that treated them as inherently less valuable than men and naturally suited for subordinate roles. The health consequences of concubinage, from toxic cosmetics to inadequate nutrition to occupational hazards associated with sexual service work, created long-term damage that affected women's quality of life and life expectancy. The beauty standards that defined their value required practices that were literally poisonous, while the work demands placed on their bodies created wear and tear that accelerated aging and disability. The psychological impact of living without autonomy, security, or recognition as a full human being created trauma that affected every aspect of these women's mental and emotional lives. The coping mechanisms required for survival often involved emotional numbing, identity fragmentation, and psychological adaptations that protected them from immediate harm while creating long-term emotional damage. The aging process for concubines represented a systematic devaluation that made their final years particularly vulnerable and insecure. Unlike other forms of work where experience and skill development might provide some protection against age-related decline, concubinage was explicitly tied to youth and physical attributes that deteriorated automatically. The career trajectory was entirely downward, with no possibility of advancement, retirement benefits, or dignified elder years. The few alternative paths available to women in these circumstances were exceptional rather than typical, requiring unusual combinations of personal capabilities, favourable circumstances, and sheer luck that most women couldn't access. The existence of these rare success stories served to justify the system by suggesting that failure to escape or improve one's circumstances reflected personal inadequacy rather than structural impossibility. The legal and social framework that supported concubinage reflected broader Greek attitudes toward women, property rights, and human value that prioritized the interests of free male citizens above all other considerations. Women in these situations had no legal standing, no political representation, and no social institutions designed to protect their interests or well-being. The cultural variations in how concubinage was practiced across different Greek city-states and time periods created different flavors of the same basic exploitation, rather than fundamentally different systems. Whether the specific practices were more or less restrictive, violent, or economically exploitative, the underlying framework remained consistent. Women served as property owned by men for their sexual, domestic, and social utility. The historical documentation of these women's experiences is filtered through male perspectives that focused on their utility to men rather than their own experiences, feelings, or perspectives. The voices of the women themselves are largely absent from historical records, replaced by descriptions of their value as property and their effectiveness in serving male needs and desires. Understanding this historical reality helps explain why these arrangements persisted for centuries despite their obvious cruelty and inefficiency from the women's perspectives. The system served the interests of the people who had power to maintain or change it, free male citizens who benefited from access to women's labour and sexuality without reciprocal obligations or responsibilities. The modern romanticization of these historical arrangements serves similar functions to the original mythology. It makes exploitation seem attractive and voluntary, while obscuring the violence and coercion that made it possible. Recognizing the reality behind the mythology helps us understand both historical women's experiences and contemporary patterns of gender-based exploitation that operate on similar principles. The women who lived these experiences deserve recognition for their resilience, creativity, and humanity despite circumstances designed to deny all three. Their survival strategies, emotional adaptations, and occasional successes in creating meaning and connection within impossible circumstances represent triumphs of human spirit over systematic dehumanization. Perhaps most importantly, understanding the historical reality of concubinage in ancient Greece reminds us that systems of exploitation aren't inevitable or natural. They're created and maintained by people who benefit from them and can be changed by people who recognize their cruelty and work to create alternatives that respect human dignity regardless of gender, social status, or economic value. The women whose lives we've explored tonight were not willing participants in romantic adventures or beneficiaries of luxurious lifestyles. They were human beings trapped in a system that treated them as objects, while expecting them to perform humanity convincingly enough to satisfy their owners' emotional and social needs. Their experiences represent one of history's clearest examples of how societies can normalize and institutionalize the systematic exploitation of vulnerable populations, while creating mythologies that justify and perpetuate the very systems that cause such suffering. Sleep well, and remember that understanding these historical realities helps us recognize and resist similar patterns of exploitation that continue to affect women around the world today. The specific forms might change, but the underlying dynamics of treating women as property valued primarily for their sexual and domestic utility remain disturbingly persistent across cultures and centuries.